Hey everybody, this is Matthew Soltesiak, and you're listening to Not the Same Old Lions podcast, part of the Minute Media Podcast Network. The Detroit Lions are now in a new, grittier era, and we look beyond just the kneecaps when it comes to the analysis. I speak with a variety of guests and interview key players, gaining more insight on what makes this team go. Welcome to another episode. In this episode, we do something a little different. It's a once-a-year venture into the world of fantasy football. We're going to look at the Detroit Lions' top players, not only discuss where each one ranks in their position category, but also talk about where you should consider drafting them and how they might compare to some of the top players in each category as well. That and more. Let's get to it, Lions fans.
This is Jason Gabenda with the Detroit Lions, and you're listening to Not the Same Old Lions podcast.
Like in previous years, we're bringing in some help for this episode. My best fantasy football days are probably now in the past, folks. I retired a few years back. That being said, I did get called out of retirement last year and ended up playing in a couple of leagues with some moderate success. But joining me today are some guys who are actively involved in the game today. First, we have a very familiar character joining us. That is the Sports Writer of the Year for Community Newspaper Holdings Incorporated. That is James Cook, the Senior Sports Writer for the Traverse City Record Eagle. James, good to have you here and good to be talking fantasy football with you.
Glad to be here. I wish I had some of the other James Cook's contract, but unfortunately, no.
All right. Well, maybe you'll give some good advice or follow your own advice and make up some of that lost revenue in fantasy football winnings. We'll see. Joining us again from last year is Chris Haynes, a friend of the podcast. In addition to being an avid Detroit Lions fan and University of Michigan fan, he also dives extensively into fantasy football, which is perfect for this episode. Chris, good to have you back on the show. It's been a while.
Matt, thanks for having me. Always look forward to this episode.
All right. Well, you, James, and I are all Detroit Lions fans. There's no hiding that. It's pretty obvious. So I am really thankful and honored to have a fourth person on this show with us. That's Coach Gene Clemens. He's been involved with the game of football for 30 years as a player, a coach, evaluator, and journalist. He's currently working with the folks at Fantasy Life as an analyst, creator, and contributor. And to my knowledge, Gene is not a homer Detroit Lions fan. Gene, welcome to the show, and thanks for joining us.
Definitely not a homer Detroit Lions fan, but I am a big fan of what you guys have been doing over these last few years. I think the NFL is better when Detroit is competitive. So I'm glad to see they're not, there's no longer this Matthew Stafford empty calorie stat seasons where everybody says he's really good, but he never wins any games. So I'm happy about that. I'm happy that the quarterback stats actually, come along with winning games. And so that's great.
All right. Awesome. Well, as we get started, remind you folks, tell your friends about the show. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all major streaming platforms. If you want the video version, you got us on YouTube. And social media wise, you can mostly find us on Twitter and Instagram. All right, we do this once a year, fantasy football with a Detroit Lions focus. So with this, we're going to discuss based on a typical 10 or 12 team league, 1 point PPR, 1 starting quarterback, that'd be 2 running backs, 3 receivers, a tight end. That said, we might throw some caveats in here. We might talk about some other situations like a 2 quarterback league or a flex reference, stuff like that. As we get started, here's one thing that comes to mind. The Lions have so many weapons that the ball can only be spread around so much. And there's only so many times you can catch the ball and get points in a game that it might get diluted. But again, I'm not the expert here, folks. The other 3 guys here, they're going to share their expertise, and they might agree with what I just said, or they might say I'm overreacting. Be part of a good offense, you're more likely to get points. So let's get started here. As we get started, guys, let's go around the horn. Any piece of general fantasy advice you'd like to give out before we start with the specific positions? James, I want to start with you with your piece of advice, and tell us what your advice was last year as well, if you remember.
Well, my advice last year was horrific. It was do not draft a guy named Saquon Barkley because the Eagles offensive coordinator does not like throwing to the running back. And they had to replace Jason Kelsey, and the tush push would take the touchdowns, and none of that came true. I thought those were legit red flags for that dude, though, going into the season.
All right. Well, what's your advice this year?
Okay, so we are a Detroit Lions focused podcast. So here's my advice. Do not draft Detroit Lions. Do not be a homer, because fans overvalue their own players and they will draft them way earlier than they probably should. So just put away your homer hat, draft the player who does the most for your team. If it's a Detroit Lion, great. But you don't have to reach to get somebody on your team.
All right. There's a good piece of advice there. Coach Clemens, what do you have?
I think the one thing you should always do in fantasy is like draft with enjoyment in mind, right? Like if you're trying to win money, you're probably not in a 10-team league, right? That's probably a home league, your friends, your buddies. You're playing more for pride. You might be playing for like some fun, like anecdotal gift or whatever it is, but you're not paying for like major money. So if you're in a 10-team league, if you're in a 12-team league, maybe you are, but draft for enjoyment. Don't put yourself in a situation where you're miserable all year because you're rooting for Vikings to do well against the Detroit Lions, right? Like having Justin Jefferson on your fantasy team when you're a Lions fan must be the craziest thing in the world, because you're sitting back going, I need him to be great, but I need them to lose, and that doesn't normally go hand in hand. So, make sure that you're enjoying what you do when you're drafting.
Gene, that's some great advice. And I got to tell you, some of the Lions opponents got me through some lean years in fantasy football for those Lions teams. When the Lions weren't doing well, like I remember some Steven Jackson touchdowns were pretty awesome for me back in the day. And I was like, well, if the Lions can't win, maybe I can win fantasy football. All right, Chris, what do you got here?
Well, I mean, Gene just took what I was going to say. So I know James was going to come out and say, don't draft Detroit Lions, and I was going to say something similar to what Gene says. Like, in the end, like unless you're playing for some big money, draft who you want to watch. Like there are certain players in the league that I love to watch, and when they're on my fantasy team, it makes it that much better. So draft for enjoyment, draft those guys that you want to watch, draft the guys that are exciting to you. Because, ever since I started playing, I watched way more games than I ever watched before. And watching certain players, progress and get better. And it's just been more fulfilling when I'm watching those guys that I really enjoy. So, if you are a Homer Lions fan and you want to draft, Gibbs or St. Brown or someone like that, then go for it. Because if that makes your Sundays that much better, then do it. Even though I don't think drafting either two of those is going to be a miss. So,
all right, great. Well, then let's get into some of the specifics here. Let's start with quarterback Jared Goff. Believe it or not, folks, he was number 2 in yards passing, 4th in touchdowns last year. That's good enough for a top 10 quarterback in real life. But the reality is it might not be good enough for top 10 in fantasy due to the fact that he's a pocket passer. Actually, Fantasy Pros, that's who I've referenced for a lot of the information I'm bringing here. These guys probably have multi pieces of information they're pulling from, but they have him ranked at about the number 14 spot. So let's start with there. What's your breakdown on Jared? Would you like him as your backup, or would you even consider him as your starter in a 12-team league? And let's start with that. James, let's start with you.
Well, if you're in a 12-teamer and Jared Goff is your starter, you probably waited a little too long. If he's your backup, that's great. He's one of those quarterbacks with the offense the Lions have that he's got a nice high floor. His ceiling isn't as high as the other quarterbacks because he simply just doesn't run the ball. He doesn't get rushing yards. He doesn't get rushing touchdowns generally. So there's a lot of other quarterbacks who pass him up in fantasy points because of that. So, but as a number 2 quarterback or as your second or third quarterback in a super flex league, pretty great selection. I mean, as a backup quarterback, that's what you want, is somebody who's going to come in and is going to score you double-digit points. He's maybe not going to come, have like a Josh Allen 44-point game late in the season or something like that, but he's going to be a guy who's going to be dependable.
All right, Coach Clemens, what are your takes on Jared Goff?
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily disagree with James per se, But also, if you're in a 10-team league, you're not going to get to Jared Goff, right? Like there's enough of those guys who can give you the rushing upside, and they can, throw the ball, or their rushing upside is so much that maybe they don't throw the ball as well. But at the end of the day, if you're in a 12-team league, you might want to start looking at Jared Goff. It's hard to throw for 4,000 plus yards these days because of the rushing upside and multiple backs and how defenses are playing. It's hard to get 30 plus touchdowns in a season because defenses are good and rushing touchdowns and so on and so forth. I don't necessarily see Jared Goff having such a major regression in 2025 that it would facilitate not taking him. They're going to have to score points, right? And this defense isn't all of a sudden going to be lights out overnight. They'll be more competitive this year. People are another year older. People under wiser. You're getting some people back who were out last year. But I think that offenses still beat good defenses at the end of the day, especially and not to mention when they're down, Jared Goff's going to be the one throwing the ball. So between the empty stats that you get when you're losing the game, and then the stats that you get when you're up and you're kind of rolling it up on people, I think Jared Goff could still have a good fantasy season. I don't know if I'm taking him in the 10. There's a lot more people there, but in 12, I might start looking at him at QB 12 if I'm holding that spot.
All right, and that's also going to be part of the strategy, right? All right, what position are you going to go with early versus late? Are you going wide receivers early and running backs and doing that thing that I used to do, which is you try and grab the last decent starting quarterback on your depth chart? Chris, what do you got here for Goff as far as what's your breakdown on him? Would you like him as your backup, or where are you looking at him?
Yeah, sure. I agree with that. What Gene was saying there, that I don't see too much of a regression for him this year. I do see that they're going to be probably in some closer games, and there's going to be some more high-scoring games looking at their schedule, playing the first-place schedule. So they're going to have to score. They're not going to be able to just kind of run the ball and just kind of grind out the clock like they have been able to in the past. So I would say with Goff, it kind of depends on where you're drafting. If you're one of those guys that likes to get one of those top 4, top 5 quarterbacks and draft one of those guys, obviously you're not going to get Goff. But let's say you miss out on those first 4 or 5 guys. I don't mind taking him as kind of taking 2 quarterbacks and maybe taking one that, maybe takes that next step. I look at like a guy like Bo Nix or something where he has that rushing upside. Maybe he takes the next step, but I'm going to have Goff as that security blanket and maybe play him and stream him a little bit more on those tougher weeks when Denver's on the road, let's say playing Kansas City or something. So.
Okay. Well, let's look at where you would take Jared Goff. You guys all talked about where, you would like him as far as, a number 1 later or a number 2 as a backup or whatnot. But what round do you think is a good round to target him? Where do you see him going, James? And where is he a good value, I guess?
It kind of depends on what platform you're playing on. Yahoo and ESPN are still kind of the two big ones, but there's a whole bunch of others cropping up now. But Goff's ADP on Yahoo is 99, and on ESPN it's 123. So there can be a pretty good amount of variance from site to site on what their ADP is. So if you're playing the whole game with a queue and waiting for where the line is and where you pick, it can be quite a bit different. So at 99, the high ADP for Yahoo, you're looking at somebody in a 12-team league. It's like 8th, 9th round.
Okay. And then do you think it's a good value to get him in that spot, or do you think you would rather wait and try and get him a little bit later and hope he falls?
I would try to wait a little bit later because there's a nice group of quarterbacks around in that same pocket that I like a little bit better, that have maybe a little higher upside because they run the ball. Guys like Caleb Williams, Chris mentioned, Bo Nix, guys like that. And I'm a big proponent of waiting on quarterbacks and then drafting 2 so that you can play the matchup game if you need to, or if one gets hurt, you still have another good one. I kind of always do that with taking 2 quarterbacks. I take my second one not too long after my first.
All right, great, great insight there, Coach Clemens. How about you? About drafting Jared Goff? 10, probably 12-team league. Are you thinking around that 10th round or 8th round if it's a 12-team league, or what are your thoughts?
Yeah, and shout out to all of the places that you've mentioned where you can get like information. Over at Fantasy Life, we have thing where you can look at every single place that plays fantasy, and you can kind of toggle and see where that player is being taken based off of which league you're drafting in. But I like to get a general consensus of where they're going. Jared Goff in a 10-team league, he's going around the 10th round, and like was already said, probably around the 8th. But the problem is that some of the guys who are ranked below him have much higher rushing upside than Jared Goff does. McCarthy's going to run. Herbert's going to run a little bit. Love's going to run a little bit. Lawrence is going to run a little bit. Even Michael Penix and Bryce Young are going to run a little bit. Bryce Young had 5 touchdowns rushing last year, and he didn't even play the entire season. So I think with that in place, the problem that you have with thinking about Goff is that there's so many other players that are that their ADP is either around the same as Goff or lower than Goff. So you're going to be able to kind of play the waiting game. And if you miss out on Goff, if I say, hey, I'm going to target Goff in round 11 or round 12 if he's still there. If you missed out on him, it's okay. There's going to be other quarterbacks that give you the same value. Now, I'm not looking at a guy like Goff or those guys to be my number one quarterback. So if those guys, if you're looking for a quality number 2, you're going to have your list of guys that are quality number 2s, which I think Goff is. So if you have any injuries with your starter or if he's on a bye week, Goff comes in, you don't really even think about it. It's almost like a set and forget. That you have him in there, and maybe even depending upon who you're playing, Goff might be a starter over somebody else just based off the matchup. But overall, there's going to be so many more, at least 6 to 7 other guys that are going to give you a little bit more rushing upside than what Goff does, and they all have weapons to throw to. So it's like it's an embarrassment of riches in the NFL right now for a lot of these quarterbacks.
Yeah, you hit on some very key topics, I think, which separates the real life from the fantasy life of football with Jared Goff, especially. And yeah, he's ranked in that tier 4 on Fantasy Pros. I like how you said on Fantasy Life, you guys can pull in a lot of different things and show people kind of like a spreadsheet, I believe it is, put together, and you can compare the different leagues because that's good to know. Chris, where are you seeing it? Where are you liking it? And remember, if it's a Lions fan that's listening to this, there's a good chance they might be in the league with a lot of other Detroit Lions fans as well, which also has that effect of people get drafted a little earlier than they maybe should.
Yeah, so perfect example. My home league, we just drafted on Friday just because that's the only time we can get together. Jared Goff went in the 10th round. He's the only quarterback for that guy. Actually, no, I guess he had Caleb Williams as a keeper. So that's kind of another one of those examples. They take him as a safe person. But, I think in probably a home league like this where you're playing with a bunch of Lions fans, he's going to go 9th, 10th round. Whereas if it wasn't, looking at some of the guys afterwards, Kyler Murray went after him, Baker Mayfield went after him. Those guys are going to be above Goff in most leagues. So if I'm looking like, Gene mentioned a couple guys that can rush, that can run the ball, and there's still like Drake May and Justin Fields and even Dak coming back now, coming back from injury. Now he has George Pickens. So I mean, there's a whole slew of guys that are kind of in that middling tier 3, tier 4 that could make that jump into the top 10 real easily.
All right, looking at guys with potential upside there. That's what I'm hearing. All right, well, as we before we transition to running backs, I'm seeing Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Jaden Daniels as like arguably the top 3. Are those the guys you see in the top 3? I mean, is Joe Burrow and Patrick Mahomes, are they outside the top 3 for a variety of reasons, or is that your top 3, James? What are you just seeing just to touch across the league, the top guys?
Yeah, I think those would be the top 3 with Jalen Hurts right behind them, and then I think Burrow 5. Burrow doesn't have the rushing upside, but they throw the ball so much in Cincinnati that just because they have such a horrible defense.
Yeah, defense
they have to throw the ball to keep up. So yeah, that's pretty much what my top 5 is.
All right, Coach Clemens, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, in some machination of those, of those names, I think Lamar Jackson is the cheat code. Anytime you get a chance to get him, you take him. He's the only quarterback that I take in the first round. He's the only guy that I do, and I mean, obviously, I don't take him if I've got 1.03, but if I'm like back into the first round, rather than take the second, take the fourth or the fourth running back or the fourth wide receiver, or maybe even the second tight end, I'm going to take Lamar Jackson because I know what he's going to do for me every week. And now that they're allowing him to play more like he played at Louisville, where he was a legitimate passer and a legitimate runner of the ball, it's practically like unstoppable. And the funny part about it is about Lamar Jackson, what he did last year rushing was him trying not to run. Like that was him making a concerted effort to not run, to not hog touchdowns by making sure, like when they got into the red zone or into the green zone, he didn't just take off and go in for a touchdown. He was making it a point to get the ball to other people, to feed the running backs, to make sure his tight ends were good, his wide receivers were good. That's why everybody was able to eat. And then Lamar Jackson still did his thing. It's hard to get past the Jalen Hurts rushing touchdowns. So I actually put him ahead of Jaden Daniels, because I think that the rushing touchdowns from Jalen Hurts are so like you can't stop it. If they get 3 yards by the goal line, he's scoring a touchdown. Like you can't get by that. You get that similarly with Josh Allen, because he's Cam Newton big, right? But with those two guys, that rushing upside just from the touchdowns are so big that I rate them Lamar, Allen, and then Hurts. Then I come in with Jaden Daniels, toggled with Joe Burrow, who's sneaky athletic, by the way. He can run. He ran for, I believe it was a 50 or 60-yard touchdown versus the Giants last year.
His longest of his career.
Yeah, the Giants fell asleep at the wheel. Like he can run, but usually he's just running to stay alive when his offensive line aren't blocking work for darn. So like if he decides that he wants to run a little bit, he can get you a quick little point, 2 points, 3 points in fantasy, which we all know that's the difference sometimes when you're playing against really elite level fantasy managers.
Yeah, excellent points. And I agree. I think Lamar Jackson probably is the cheat code. I mean, you kind of forget how incredible those stats were he put up last year. And I was probably on the bandwagon that thought Lamar should have been the MVP, but that's a whole nother topic right there. But with him throwing the ball that much and running, like it's pretty darn incredible. Chris, what do you got? Top three? Anything different than what the other guys have said, or any other caveats you got in there?
No, those are all the same top five. I have Lamar being one, followed by Allen, Hurts, then Jane Daniels and Burrow. A lot of same ideas there. I don't want to leave the draft without one of those five. Preferably one of those top four, maybe not with Burrow, just because you just never know if maybe those passing numbers kind of fluctuate a little bit. I want that mobile quarterback. I want that rushing upside. So my strategy most of the time is I try to be the last one to pick out of those four, and whoever's left with those four, I want to hit those. I want to hit that guy. So this year I wound up going with Hurts. Lamar, Josh Allen went before me. I went with Hurts because I want one of those top four guys.
All right. Well, I think quarterback was pretty straightforward with this one with Jared Goff, and there's only one starter on the team for that. Things get a little murkier with running backs, and you wouldn't think it would be this crazy, but for one team. But you've got two NFL starting caliber running backs in Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery on this Detroit Lions team, and we've seen stat-wise they've both done pretty incredible the last couple of years. Jahmyr Gibbs is checking in at ranked number 2 among running backs. David Montgomery is checking in at 21. Now, one piece of advice that was given last year was people were overdrafting Gibbs and they were underdrafting Montgomery, meaning Montgomery was going late. So there's some strategy there right now. And we don't know what it's going to look like this year as a new offensive coordinator in Detroit as well. But James, is it worth taking Gibbs? He's coming in right behind Bijan Robinson, arguably. Some might say he's better. Is it going to be a 60-40 split this year? Is it worth it going with Gibbs early? Is it better to take Montgomery late? What are you seeing there?
I mean, they're both good options. I mean, if you got to pick high enough to get Gibbs, and it's going to have to be in the top half or third of your first round to get Gibbs this year. I mean, go for him. I don't know that he's going to replicate 20 touchdowns this year, so there might be some regression in that. But the tantalization of them saying that they're going to use him even more in the passing game this year just can negate some of that. He's probably not going to score 20, but I mean, if he scores 15 and has another 300 yards receiving, more than he had last year, that's pretty well break even, and you're still looking at he's going to return exactly what you want with a top 3 pick.
All right. How about you, Coach Clemens? What are you seeing here? Gibbs is obviously the guy that's caught fire. A lot of people outside of Detroit, I think, sometimes overlook David Montgomery. You can let us know if that's what you're seeing from outside the state, or if people are still giving Montgomery his due, because he came out and said he feels like he's a forgotten man this offseason with Jahmyr Gibbs gaining all the attention. But they're a great duo there. What are you seeing here with fantasy football?
So just full disclosure, I was one of the few people who out of college thought Jahmyr Gibbs was right on par with Bijan Robinson. In my evaluation, I thought he was a guy who could be, what we saw. He went to the wrong team for him for fantasy, unfortunately, right? He went to the wrong team. David Montgomery is a solid running back. He's a good running back. He's not a great running back. And he's essentially just taking carries away from Gibbs. Like, to the credit of the Detroit Lions, they don't care about fantasy. They don't give a damn about fantasy, right? So, like, to their credit, they're like, hey, we're trying to keep Gibbs as healthy as possible by allowing him to get less carries, less wear and tear on his body, and it's working. The interesting part is that everybody is ranking Gibbs based off of what he did last year because he didn't have a number 2 guy, right? When Montgomery went down, he got all the usage, and now we saw what he is when he, you know what I'm saying, when all of the governors are off the Maserati. And so, like, when you let the car go and he just starts going crazy, yeah, it's great. You're probably not going to get that because we can't guarantee David Montgomery is going to be injured. So I have him further down, and I know a lot of people have him further down, maybe 4 or 5, maybe even 6 in some cases with running backs, because I can't guarantee that he's going to get the level of volume that he got in those weeks when David Montgomery was out of commission. We saw it when he was a rookie. When Montgomery was out, he went crazy. We saw it again. When Montgomery's out, he goes crazy. We can't guarantee Montgomery's going to be out, especially going out for the stretch run of fantasy, right? The end of the year and into the playoffs. It was a perfect time in fantasy for David Montgomery to go down. I don't think we'll see that this year. That's why I think he's a little bit further down for me. And then also David Montgomery's problem is, yes, he's going to get short yardage carries, but he's the starter back. He's not the finish back. Gibbs is the finish back. If y'all, and you guys know better than anyone because you're Lions fans, when the Lions start the game, they start the game with Montgomery going ham. He's boom, 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 boom. His job is to wear down the defense so that they can then unleash Gibbs. That's kind of counterintuitive to what we used to see with guys like Jerome Bettis, who used to be more finishers as opposed to starters. So I think that is why he's down for us right now. I think in fantasy life, he's down at running back 31. So like, I think that's a part of why people aren't sure how. And then obviously he doesn't get as much usage in the passing game, and it sounds like he's going to get even less this year. So that's where they are for me. I still like them both. In a perfect world, I'd love to try to get both on my team. I'm not going to reach for either one of them, but if they fall to me where I am and the values they're good, I'm going to take them.
All right, you brought up a lot of interesting points there. You know, the Montgomery injury last year happened right during that stretch of fantasy football where people are going to the playoffs. Plus, it was late in the season, and so everyone's like, "Oh, Jahmyr Gibbs is peaking," and so it's like, "All right, well, we're seeing the next level of Jahmyr Gibbs." But you're right, with David Montgomery's there, the Lions, this is a perfect situation for them, Chris, is to have both guys. But how many Lions fans did we hear the first half of the season complaining that one guy's getting the carries and not the other? And it's like, you know, you're darned if you do, you're darned if you don't with those two situations. Now, it will be interesting with the new coordinator. They're talking about having, you know, two running backs on the field at the same time. And it was hilarious, actually. The preseason game the other night, they asked David Montgomery, they said, you know, what's the challenge of you and Jahmyr both being at running back? You know, with you guys and all these these other great players, you can't all be on the field at the same time. And he said, yes, we can. Yes, we can. So we might see a little bit more of that. And we know David Montgomery can catch. We know the type of runner he is. But also, like Coach Clemens said, Chris, the more seasoned Jahmyr gets, the more they're going to trust him in those late game situations. Before it was always you give it to Montgomery because he's a veteran. And so what are your thoughts on Gibbs and Montgomery here, Chris?
So I'm good with taking Gibbs in the first round. I look at like the running backs ahead of him. You got, you know, Bijan. We've got, you know, second-year quarterback who's only started 3 games prior to this year. So let's see how that offense goes, and it's going to go through Bijan. So I think he's the kind of the clear-cut number one. But there's still question marks there. Will the offense run as more efficiently than it did with Kirk Cousins? I think so. I think it will. But what time will tell, right? Barkley, he's got a lot of touches, you know, over 300 touches, had a long Super Bowl run. You know, they wound up sitting him out for one game, so he couldn't break the record, but he's got a lot of mileage on his treads from last year. So let's see going into this year, does fatigue hit him sooner? It could. Maybe halfway, 3/4 of the way through the season, maybe he starts breaking down a little bit. So, you know, I look at the next kind of few running backs, Derrick Henry, Christian McCaffrey, they're all older. Ashton Genty, you know, he's a young guy coming out. We haven't seen him yet, so he could be a stud. He could be just on a lousy offense. We don't know yet. So I think Jahmyr is a pretty safe option because he can catch the ball. So if you want to take him, you know, for the 3rd overall pick, I'm all for it. Like he's going to be a safe running back, I think. Now with Montgomery, I'm okay with him being my number 2. I'm not going to take probably both of them just by the way that the draft will lay. But I'm okay with taking Monty as my number 2 or maybe my number 3, and then kind of reaching for maybe a rookie or 2 later on, one that might not start off with a job and then maybe develops over the season and winds up taking over for the starter.
All right. James, how about you? Number 2, David Montgomery. Would you be okay with him as your number 2, or do you feel more comfortable with him as your number 3 running back?
Number 3 for sure. I mean, he's somebody who, you know, he's going to get his carries. You know, like Gene said, he's going to be the guy who starts the game and they pound the ball to him early. So he's going to get his carries. When they get the ball inside the 5, he's more likely to be the goal line type back, although they did use Jahmyr a decent amount there last season. So Montgomery as your 3rd running back is a pretty good scenario of a guy who has, you know, a nice production, a nice safe role, and has touchdown upside.
All right. Gene, I'm presuming 3, maybe 4 is where you see David Montgomery?
Yeah, you know, and here's the thing, and this is what you always have to consider. Chris, you know, Chris's league, you know, withstanding, they took a quarterback over some of the best quarterbacks in fantasy.
Yeah.
I don't know what's going on over there, but I'm only messing with you, Chris. Hopefully you didn't do that.
No, that wasn't me. No.
Yeah, that's all that matters. You got one of the ones.
He took last place last year, so that's probably going to happen again.
He'll be doing whatever the punishment is again this year for sure. The problem is in a 10-team league, David Montgomery just doesn't have as much value because you're going to get a starting running back. There's 32 starting running backs.
Yeah.
So like which number 1 are you taking David Montgomery over? That's what you have to ask yourself. Right? Like, and the answer is probably none, because they're going to get more work than David Montgomery is, because David Montgomery's in a timeshare. Now, it might get a little tricky. Even if you find 5 that you're willing to take over him, that still puts him at a low running back 3 at the most, right? So
Yep.
from that standpoint, in a 10 team league, his value drops precipitously. Now, when you start getting up into the higher things for people who play, 14 team leagues and maybe even some beyond, now his value jumps. Even in the 12 team league, his value jumps up more. But in a 10 team league, it's just not enough. It's the same kind of situation that Jared Goff has in a 10 team league. You're just going to find more value and more people probably at the 1 and at the 2, and even in some cases at running back at the 3.
That makes a lot of sense. And I agree that the 12-team league is more of you have to know a little bit more about football because of the fact that in a 10-team league, I mean, I teach high school in addition to this, and some of my students tell me about their leagues, and they tell me their rosters. And then I ask how many teams are in their league, and I'm glad you're sitting down for this one, Coach Clemens, because they tell me they have 8 teams in their league. And I'm just like, guys, that's not even real. Like, why are you even doing that? And so, yeah. But Coach, you also brought up another great thing, Coach Clemens and Chris was talking about this, is the other people in your league might not know as much as you, and they might pull that draft pick from left field, and you do your best not to laugh out loud when it happens because you're like, did that just happen?
No, you do one of these. You just hit them with the fist. Take another swig of whatever you're sipping on eat another wing, lean back. You're like, you know what? This is going to be a good draft.
All right, well, let's look at just we kind of hit on them, but the top guys, Derrick Henry, Christian McCaffrey are older. Saquon Barkley got more use than Larry Johnson did in Kansas City one year, it feels like. And so start with you, James. Is there any of those top running backs that you're worried about having a drop-off this year, or anybody that just makes you nervous making them your number one?
Well, I mean, Barkley's going to have some regression. I mean, last year was a historic season. Duplicating that is going to be incredibly difficult. I think that the Eagles are going to manage him a little bit more too this season, manage that workload. I mean, they can't do that to him back-to-back seasons. And we saw that week 17 where they just said, you're not going to play. You got a chance to break the record, but you're just not going to play. So I think that there's going to be some regression, but he's still, a stud running back, obviously. The guy that I don't want anything to do with that's going in the first round is Christian McCaffrey. He has had those huge seasons and everything, but he's now 21 and has had 7 leg injuries.
He's 21?
Or 29, sorry. He's 29 years old, and since 2020, he's had 7 leg injuries. Last year he had that Achilles thing. A frayed tendon is something that does not heal itself, and he has not had a surgery to fix it. So he would be somebody that if I draft, you're worried about every time he touches the ball, that's it.
Yeah. Okay. Coach Clemens, how about you on the those upper running backs, that some that are maybe older or have had heavier use? Anyone that you're concerned about, or you're maybe just not your first choice if you can avoid them?
Yeah. So first off, I'd like to go and say I know that everybody thinks that Saquon Barkley is going to regress this year and that he had a lot of carries and Larry Johnson and da-da-da-da-da-da. That was probably the most ho-hum 380 whatever ridiculous carries that a running back has ever had. How many times did you see Saquon Barkley in a game get rocked? How many times did you see him get just absolutely blasted? Most of it, like when you think about like running, what Larry Johnson was doing when he got all those carries, it was him taking hit after hit after hit after hit. That was not the case for Saquon Barkley. Saquon Barkley was taking hits from DBs. Larry Johnson was breaking hits from defensive ends and linebackers. That's a different level of wear and tear. I think that Saquon Barkley sitting down in week 17 was one of the biggest mistakes he ever makes. And you know who knows it? He does. Because now that he has a Super Bowl, it's about legacy now. It's about going down as being one of the greatest ever. He is going to be on a mission to repeat last year and not only repeat it, but repeat it and outdo it. Because when was the last time we saw someone go for back-to-back 2,000-yard seasons and in the second season break the rushing record? So any chance, like there was a lot of times in the season where he didn't play in the fourth quarter. He was just hanging out. He was chilling. Like, I think he's coming for all of the smoke this year. I'm not taking a running back in fantasy over him. If he's there whenever I'm drafting him. Now, obviously, Bijan Robinson should get more usage. You know, Durag City down there in Atlanta. You know, Michael Penix Jr., a Tampa boy. So shout out to Tampa. Like, he's going to get it. He's going to be able to bring in a little bit of rushing upside, which open things up for him. McCaffrey, I am worried about because not because of age, but because he's off injured. The one that I'm looking at and I'm going, people don't fall for the banana in the tailpipe. Chase Brown is going as RB8 right now in consensus, right? He's a consensus RB8. I just don't see that. Like, I don't see him being a guy that I'm looking to take as a top 10 running back. I like Bucky Irvin more. I like Josh Jacobs more. I like Taylor more. I'm staying away from him. Devin Achane should have another really good season. That's a guy who's going top 5 for running backs, who I think is kind of running back like proof because he's got the pass receiving upside. That's really where I'm looking at. And some of the guys like Matthew Berry, his ride or die this year is Amarion Hampton. And while I love the boss a lot, I could not disagree more. He's in a two running back scenario. I don't like that. You know, I don't like maybe 3. I don't like that at all, ever. Like, if I'm going to pick somebody to be my ride or die, it's going to be somebody who's getting all the carries, or at least most of the carries. And so I think people are drafting Amarion Hampton really high. If you're looking for some sleepers, there's some sleepers out there. You know, down the line, I think Travion Henderson is somebody people should keep an eye on. And then RJ Harvey, what happens with him in Denver? I think RJ Harvey has a chance to really be a sneaker out there, because if Sean Payton loves you as a running back, you do great things.
Mm-hmm. Those are some great insights, especially on Saquon Barkley. I like the fact that you brought up he wasn't getting hit by the linebackers. It was the defensive backs, or he was jumping over them. I mean, you know, So he was taking different types of hits, and you're exactly right. That offense is set up in a really good spot that if he's motivated, which we presume him to be, and knowing that he has all that in front of him, he's in a really good situation. Chris, you know, I mean, Bijan Robinson's, you know, a second-year, third-year guy, but that offense is in flux. Jahmyr Gibbs is splitting time. I'm not going to – you tell me, what are you seeing out of these top running backs? Who's the guy you're leaning towards the most? Who's the guy that you want to stay away from?
Well, I'll tell you, I wasn't scared off on Christian McCaffrey. I just draft him because the way I look at it now is I don't want to take second place. I want to take first place. So I'm going to take the guy who, you know, was injury prone going into 2022 and then was the number 1 overall running back and was over 100 points higher than every other running back. I'm going to take a guy that I can, you know, hit a home run with. He went to Germany. He went and saw a specialist, the best specialist for what he has going on. He got some treatment that he can't get here in the States. His teammates, Kyle Juszczyk is saying he looks more explosive than he did 2 or 3 years ago. I know one thing. Best shape of his life. Best shape of his life. I mean, yeah, that might just be teammate speak, but I don't hear Kyle Juszczyk saying that about anyone else. So I don't know. I mean, I know what I do know is that he wasn't used last year, so he should have fresh legs, right? I love Devon Achane. He's my boy. I went back to back with those two. I figure who can be the top 2 running backs in the league and have the best chance at being like 100 points higher than anyone else. I think it's those two. I mean, Derrick Henry's up there. Derrick Henry's going to get his touchdowns. He's going to push for 2,000 yards again this year. But you know, he's aging too. And is this the year he falls off? I don't know. He might, But you know what? I'm just going to go for broke on this year, and hopefully some of my other running backs later on. Gene said R.J. Harvey. I like R.J. Harvey. I like Henderson. Henderson went a little too high in our draft. He shot up the draft board. I want to get drafted like the 3rd or 4th round. But I wound up going R.J. Harvey, and then hopefully maybe some of these other running backs later on might take over. Maybe someone like Jaden Blue, Tootin. Those guys could work themselves into a timeshare even, or go maybe Bucky Irving's counterpart in Rachaad White. I mean, Rachaad White was a top 24 running back last year, and he didn't do anything other than catch some passes. 3-4 passes a game and score some touchdowns. So, an injury here or there can swing a lot of things.
Well, Chris, let me ask you, what rounds did you draft McCaffrey and H.A. in?
So I was picked 9 out of 10. So I went 9 and 11 or 9 and 12.
Okay, your top 2 picks.
Top 2 picks.
All right.
But we also have a keeper league. So I have Bowers. I had him kept in like the 10th or 11th round. So I knew that one of my onesie positions was taken care of. So I can take some chances in the early rounds.
All right, well, you brought up Bowers. Let's go to tight end. All right, Sam LaPorta is no slouch himself. He comes in at number 4. Do you guys like that slot? Is his value worth it? What round do you see him going in? And when are you looking to draft a tight end? And do you think it's better to wait and take the tight end late or go early? James, let's jump back over to you on talk to us about tight end and Sam LaPorta.
I think where he's at as the 4th tight end is pretty much perfect. I mean, that's kind of where I have him. And then Hawkinson right behind him. But you can get Hawkinson like a round later is another thing. And I think that Hawkinson's going to put up pretty similar numbers. He's going to be the safety blanket for essentially a rookie quarterback. And J.J. McCarthy in college loved throwing to the tight end. Mm-hmm. So hopefully that transitions over to the NFL in his game. But the tight end field is actually a little deeper, I think, than it has been in previous years. I mean, it used to be that there was like 3 guys and then that was it. And then it was just darts after that. It seems like it's a little deeper now.
Yeah, it does. And the thing about Sam LaPorta, Coach Clemens, is he's not the only guy that can catch the ball in this offense. Brock Bowers he's got a new quarterback and stuff this year. No, yeah, he does. But, how are you seeing Sam LaPorta stack up against some of these other guys? Do you like him at that number 4 spot? And do you kind of subscribe to what James is saying, which is true? It's not just 3 guys at tight end. You can get some guys at 7, 8, 9 that are pretty solid.
Yeah, it's deeper, and so I think first comes draft strategy. Bowers and McBride are the heavy target guys, right? They're going to get the crazy targets. At least McBride did last year. You would assume he will again. Brock Bowers will again because of the structure of the Raiders. Number one, they upgraded at quarterback. They got the most accurate quarterback in the game. If you've been watching any of the preseasons, you can already see it already. He can fit the ball in anywhere. He's one of the more underrated passers in all of the game, and he's a sneaky runner as well. But Bowers is going to be the prize. But in order to get Bowers in a 10-team league, you're probably going to have to take him in the 2nd round. McBride as well. The rest of the guys, you're talking about possibly dropping anywhere between like round 4 and on, right? So it gets trickier on how you want to like approach it. I think George Kittle is set up to have an astronomical season. Did you know that George Kittle has never had a 100-target season? How has he been this good? And they don't target him anywhere near as much as the elite tight ends. That's bananas. Guess what? I think it's going to happen this year because they have to. All of their wide receivers are hurt, and they're all fragile, and they're kind of feminine sometimes. You're like, what? Like, dude, do you want to win a fashion show or do you want to play football? Like, I don't know what's going on. All I know is that George Kittle, he shows up in that cutoff and that trucker hat, he's ready to play football. And that's the guy I want to go to war with, especially if Christian McCaffrey is back. Because if Christian McCaffrey is back, that is when George Kittle is absolutely lethal in the play action. And that's where you have one of the best play callers in the game just playing with defenses out there. So I like George Kittle a lot more than maybe some others would. I would pass on Bowers and McBride if I'm trying to target a guy like Kittle. I think that Mark Andrews is being slept on because everybody was on the Isaiah Likely is going to usurp him train, which I was. And then Isaiah Likely got injured for God knows how long. I think Mark Andrews, all the reports are that he's having one of his best camps ever. I think he realizes that Likely is on his heels. He started last year slow, not because he regressed, but because he was coming off an injury and a car accident. And he wasn't right. And so once he started getting right, it was touchdown after touchdown after touchdown after touchdown. And for tight ends, it is volume or it's touchdowns. That's all it's catches or it's touchdowns. So you can't turn your back on Travis Kelce, even though all of the numbers are down on him as far as his yards per reception and yards per target and all the other advanced metrics. You know what I know? He's going to get a lot of targets still. And as long as he's getting hella targets, he's going to be in there for me as a guy that I want to take advantage of everybody else saying, I'm probably out on Travis Kelce. So he's, where he's being drafted now, he would have never been drafted, in years. You're telling me I can get Travis Kelce in the 7th, 8th, maybe even 9th round, depending upon how your 10-team league is going. I'll just sit back and wait for Travis Kelce, and I'll just keep loading up on top-tier talent at wide receiver and running back, knowing that I have a Travis Kelce in the back pocket.
All right, a lot of great points there. That target thing is real interesting as well, because you might be afraid of Sam LaPorta because they've got, Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jameson Williams, but Sam LaPorta had 83 targets last year, guys. That's you're talking volume, right, Coach? And so, but we also know Brock Bowers and Kelce. I mean, Kelce's going to get volume because I should know who the Kansas City Chiefs wide receivers are at this point, but I don't remember. And Patrick Mahomes might not either. So, Kelce's going to get his volume, and we see him talking about being motivated and wanting to come back better than last year. But Chris, I know you got Bowers in your league because you have him as a keeper. Amazing job getting him as your keeper. But what do you think with Sam LaPorta here? Are you liking him in the top 3 or 4? And what are your thoughts on LaPorta in the tight end spot?
So goes back to your draft strategy, right? So if I'm going to draft a quarterback early, I'm not going to draft one of those top 3 because that just takes away too much value from those other positions. So, if I didn't have Bowers as a keeper, I'm not taking him or McBride in the first 2 or 3 rounds. I might target Kittle if he drops to the 5th or 6th because I agree. Kittle is going to be a man-child this year. I mean, Ayuk is hurt. I don't know when he's actually going to come back. Jennings is hurting for a contract. He's not gonna come play in the preseason or anything until he gets a new contract. Pearsall's coming off of an injury this preseason too. So who are they going to throw the ball to? Well, Christian McCaffrey and Kittle. So the Kittle's going to get a ton of targets this year. Smelling salts weren't banned. He can still use those. So he's going to hit one of those and go out and just hurt somebody. So, so if I could get Kittle, a little bit later, great. If not, I'm just going to wait. LaPorta was probably going to go, him or Hawk are going to be the next 2. I'll just keep waiting. I'll just wait. And, maybe I'll get a guy like Andrews or wait on Kelce or maybe get like David Njoku, who with Jameis Winston last year had a great year. Joe Flacco starts this year. Maybe he'll get a ton of targets. Guy like Evan Engram, I don't know. He's kind of up there too, but I don't trust him going to a new system. So I'm just going to kind of wait and see if I can get Kelce, Andrews, and Njoku. Those are kind of my 3 targets after those first 4 or 5 guys.
Okay. Well, we hit
tight
Matthew, end. Yeah.
Real quick, the problem that LaPorta fans are going to run into is if Gibbs is supposed to be more involved in the passing game, right? If you're going to put 2 backs on the field at the same time, who are you taking off? Right? Who are you taking off?
But who's going to block too for those 2, right? If LaPorta's going to stay in and block.
Exactly. If Jameson Williams is supposedly going to take the next step this year and become not just the take the top off, burn you guy, if he's going to become a more complete wide receiver, who's that going to take targets away from? we already see LaPorta not getting the level of targets that help him get in the end zone, because that's going to get gobbled up by the running backs. So everywhere you look, it seems to be pulling away from Sam LaPorta. And I think that's the problem when you say, hey, we have a lot of weapons, we have a lot of, people, and we're going to put them all on the field at the same time. There's still only one football, right?
He's probably the fourth at targets on that team, right?
Exactly.
You're going to go St. Brown, Williams, and Gibbs first before you go LaPorta, unless you're scheming up something for him.
Unless you're scheming up something like specifically for LaPorta, and there's no guarantee that gets him in the end zone. I think that's the problem. He doesn't, and I don't think he has he doesn't have that Brock Bowers thing where I can split you out and just play you like a wide receiver. Like I think he's a solid like pass catcher. I don't think he's a next level like wide receiver type of tight end. And I think that's the problem for him. When he was the number 2 option, or maybe like 2B, like you saw the work. But the moment that Jameson Williams became Jameson Williams, you're like, okay, well, what are we going to do? Jahmyr Gibbs, he's Jahmyr Gibbs. What are we going to do? Do I throw it to Gibbs or do I throw it to LaPorta? I think that'll always be Gibbs.
Yeah, those are some interesting points. And, a couple things with that. The Lions do have a new offensive coordinator. So what changes are they going to make? Gibbs had 63 targets last year. David Montgomery had 38. If those guys both go up, well, what about Jameson Williams? He had 91 last year. If those go up, St. Brown had 141. I don't think those can go up based on everything else. And so that's going to be the big conundrum with most Detroit Lions players is, as we said, and Coach Clemens said, there is one ball. And so it can be a very potent offense, but it's going to be who's going to get the ball, who's going to be more consistent, and that leads us right into wide receiver. And that's what Amon-Ra St. Brown is, if nothing else. Consistently good, consistently great. He's coming in ranked at number 7. Jameson Williams is ranked at number 25 overall for wide receivers. I'm kind of surprised that St. Brown's coming in at 7, but you guys are going to enlighten me on this one and tell me how that's super accurate or you disagree with it. Let's just start with St. Brown, though. Do you believe the 7's the right spot for him? Is that a guy you would like to target in the first round, or see more of a, what round do you see him going in, and how are you feeling about St. Brown, James?
I think 7's pretty fair. I think I would even put him at maybe 6. I don't know that there's that many more guys that I want, especially in a PPR format. He's just PPR gold. And then they've started using it more, on routes. They'll get him touchdowns. His touchdowns have started going up more too. So I see him right behind. I mean, he's a guy that could be a late first round pick, depending on how your draft falls. Depending on how many guys go running back, if you're in a super flex, if some quarterbacks go in there or something like that. But I mean, he's a late first round pick, and you'll be happy with that at wide receiver. He's going to produce every week.
Okay. Coach Clemens from outside the state of Michigan here, for what I'm seeing is they've got Nico Collins and Malik Neighbors ranked above Amon-Ra St. Brown. And I don't know if that's a product of how many people on the offense, if it's, maybe a different aspect to the game that they'd like to see from some of these deep guys. What are you thinking on St. Brown? Are you liking him at 7? You think he's a little bit better? Or what are your overall thoughts?
Yeah, so I think 7 might be even a little high. Okay. Not enough for me to argue with, right? Yeah. Not enough for me to argue with. We're splitting hairs here, but my problem with St. Brown in a lot of circumstances is he's not necessarily known as a big play wide receiver. So everything that he is based off of him getting targeted and he catches everything, right? Like he's not going to drop much of anything. So like everything is predicated on him having multiple targets when just for argument's sake, Jamar Chase gets one pass, it goes for 85 yards and a touchdown. Boom. You're good for the day. He's probably going to get you another one of those if he hits that early, right? Same with CeeDee Lamb, same with Justin Jefferson, Nico Collins, Malik Neighbors, now with upgraded quarterback play, Brian Thomas, AJ Brown. these are guys who are so explosive that they can get you your fantasy day in one play, right? And I don't think that that's a St. Brown thing. It's not a diss against him. It's just the way in which he's utilized. So like him and your Puka Nakuas, like they're Lad McConkey's, they're in the same, to me, they're all in the same boat of we're going to need heavy targets, make some people miss. You know, the big plays are I had 3 18-yard receptions, you know, like I had 3 27-yard catches, that type of thing, but not the 65. That's why everyone loves Jameson Williams so much, because they want to see, or at least they think that he could break out, is because he gives you that home run hitting ability. I think that St. Brown's going to be just another consistent top 10 performance in fantasy this year. Like nothing crazy. Nobody's going to ever think he's the best wide receiver in the game, but he'll just go out there and do what he does because he's one of the most consistent, if not the most consistent wide receivers in the game right now. And I think that that's enough. He doesn't necessarily have to be the elite. Also, one of my bold predictions this year for fantasy is that all 4 LSU wide receivers are going to finish the top 5 of fantasy this year. So it'll be, you know, Chase and Jefferson and Neighbors and Thomas. Like those 4 guys are going to finish in the top 5 because they're going to get the ridiculous targets like St. Brown gets, but some of those targets are going to be 85 and 70-yard and 65-yard touchdown passes.
All right, that's an interest. That would be incredible. Four guys from the same college doing something like that at the next level. Chris, St. Brown, you know, it's a guy that you think you know what he's going to get you. It's not one of those, you know, are we going to feast or famine type thing from week to week? Is that enough for you? Where are you seeing St. Brown go, and where are you comfortable with him at, and where did he go in your draft?
He went in our draft. He actually went in the first round. He went 2 picks before I picked. So he went 7. So he was the 4th receiver off the board. So again, home league, right? But I would have been safe. I would have been okay with him taking him in like the middle of the 2nd round. I like what Gene was saying. You got guys that can hit the home run, and St. Brown doesn't run those routes. He's running those intermediate routes, especially the ones that go to the sideline. So he's not getting hit, not getting hurt. Those other guys, there are some injury concerns with some of them. But again, like those are guys that they're gonna hit home runs. Puka, I'm a little worried about. Stafford, I don't know what his health is like. So I think I would put St. Brown above Puka because I've seen Jimmy G throw, and I don't trust Jimmy G. I'm going to stay away from Puka. Nico, I love. Drake London, I think I put him even above St. Brown at this point, just because I think Drake London has a chance with Michael Penix in that small sample size of those 3 games. I mean, he was a stud. He got hyper targeted, over 10 targets a game in those 3 games. You know, I'm not going to extrapolate it out for a full season, but like if he's even getting 7 to 10 targets a game, like that's going to be a huge difference in the types of targets that he's going to get compared to St. Brown, where he's going to get some more of those 50-50 balls and have a chance to take it to the house.
Okay, well then let's move to the other guy, Jameson Williams, the guy who, James, we're expecting to progress even more. We already saw him take a big step forward last year, and I grabbed him in the leagues I was in. He did take a step forward, but there does seem to be another spot available, another gear for him to hit. He does have that home run threat, either running or catching the ball and then running afterwards. He's ranked 25 overall. Where are you seeing him go? You know, what round are you seeing him go in? Is that a guy you would like to target because he's got a lot of upside? Or just what are your overall feelings on Jameson Williams at this point?
I think Jameson Williams has upside, but I don't know how much more upside he has in the Lions offense. There's so many mouths to feed. How many more targets is he going to be able to get?
Mm-hmm.
You said it was 93 last year.
91, yeah.
I don't know. I don't see that number going up significantly. So I think statistically, at least for fantasy, we're looking at he last year, right? I mean, he scored his touchdowns. They did some gadget plays with him. Maybe they run some more reverses than they did last year or something. But I don't know from a fantasy perspective that he's going to be better considerably than last year. In an NFL terms, it can absolutely be better. But I think in fantasy, just the usage with so many mouths to feed in the Detroit offense, I don't know that that you're going to see a huge increase. So I think where he's going, is fine. I mean, he was 1,000-yard receiver last year. So, I mean, how many of those do you get anymore? I don't know that I'm going to see him getting 1,300 yards.
Very fair. And again, that's what we talked about from the beginning, that there's so many talented guys on this team that you can only throw the ball so many times. I mean, unless you're doing an onside kick every time, your defense is going to have to be on the field for a little bit, so your offense actually has to get off the field. Coach Clemens, what are you seeing on Jameson Williams there? And obviously we know the whole back on the offense being that there's a lot of other talented guys with him, but what do you like about JMO, and where do you see him realistically going?
Yeah, I like him. I like him a lot, but I also like Jalen Waddle a lot. And unfortunately, it's like the Spider-Man meme, right? They're looking at each other, pointing. They do a thing, they do it really, really well. There doesn't seem to be any room for them to get more, right? This isn't Cincinnati where T. Higgins could get wide receiver 1 targets, even though he's clearly the wide receiver 2 in Cincinnati, because who else are they throwing to, right? There's a ton of mouths to feed, and all of those guys want to eat because they all want contracts. I think this might be a regression year for Jameson Williams. I wouldn't be surprised to see him kind of take a step back in yardage and touchdowns for sure. I just think that there's so many different places to go with the football, and they won't want to lose the identity of this team. We want to be hard-nosed. We want to be blue-collar, biting ankles, and making sure that we keep the identity, keep the main thing the main thing. So they're going to run the ball. And so if they're running the ball, all the wide receivers aren't going to suffer. That one wide receiver is going to suffer. That's Jameson Williams. I think he regresses this year. I probably wouldn't take him in fantasy this year because of that.
Very interesting. And again, we've talked about how real life and fantasy football don't always line up. And a lot of Lions fans felt some of that last year as a 15-2 pretty incredible season was going on. Not every player was getting the stats those who drafted them wanted. And so, Chris, what are you thinking here with Jameson Williams?
Well, so you hear the coaching staff say they're going to use him different. They're going to throw the ball down the field more. So that instantly makes everyone think that, oh, he's going to be more productive. He's going to have more targets and whatnot. Well, you still have to connect on those. If you're going to throw the ball downfield further, that the chances of the percentage of him catching it is going to go down compared to one of those intermediate routes. So you still got to connect on those. And is Goff going to be able to still connect on those? Maybe he'll hit on some, but he might get a couple more targets, but they're going to be a riskier target. So his reception total is probably going to come down. If he does hit on a couple of those big plays, then maybe he does jump up. I see him somewhere around 20 to 25 wide receiver, kind of ending the year, which is about where he was last year. And that's about where he's getting drafted at. So if you want to take him there, that's fine. Most of Detroit Lions home leagues, you're probably not going to get him if you're going to wait that long.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, you found out with Amon-Ra St. Brown in your Lions home league where he went. And, it's a talented offense. There's going to be a lot of points scored, we expect, and a lot of guys doing a lot of great things. And I agree with, Coach Clemens. I think all of us do is the Lions – MO since they got here, since Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell came to town, is we want to run that football, and that will help set up the pass, and then they'll do both. But they're not going to go away from that run. At least we don't think so with John Morton. It'll be a work in progress. We'll see as the season goes on, but we expect a few different wrinkles. Well, let's jump over to defense rather quickly. The Lions come in ranked 9th. I think the biggest detriment to the Lions defense is probably their schedule this year. They are facing very tough opponents, their road schedule. And again, the NFC North and the NFC East are all facing tough opponents this year. I think some people overlook that. It's not just the Detroit Lions. But if you are looking for a defense you can run with every week, James, is the Lions one you want to run with, or is it like, man, those matchups are going to be scary. They're going to be point fests. Maybe you're going to use them as a streamer one, or you're going to, I don't know, you tell me, what are you thinking with the Lions defense?
Yeah, I don't think you'd probably be able to stream them because somebody's going to own them. Are they a top 3 or 4 defense? I don't think so either. Last year when they were healthy for like the first 5 games of the season before Hutch goes down in that Cowboys game, they were a top 5 defense. They were 1 or 2, I believe it was, statistically. And they get all those injuries, and obviously the wheels fell off. But this year you've got such a tough schedule too. That even if they're playing the way they were those first 5 games, I don't know that they're a top 2 or 3 defense. You've got Denver, Baltimore, Pittsburgh type defenses out there, sitting out there, that are going to be those type of defenses and have better schedules. So I think if you don't get one of like those 3, then yeah, you might as well just wait. You stream if you want, unless you're in a league that uses Fab. Then you don't want to have to waste your Fab every week on streaming a defense. Yeah, I'm not big on drafting defenses high unless you really want to. Generally what I do is the last 3 rounds of the draft are usually your kicker, your defense, the last 2. So I move those up 1 and then take whatever running back or wide receiver is left in that last round. And that way maybe you get your defense that you wanted. Maybe you get your kicker you wanted. But I don't put a whole lot of priority on that. When you see somebody take like their defense in the 7th round, you're like, what is going on here?
All right. Well, that's some great advice. I like the idea of, going that round early on each of those, so you kind of get your choice of some of the ones that are in the pack there. Coach Clemens, your thoughts on the Lions defense? Is that schedule they have just too much of a detriment for you to really consider them?
Yeah, I don't even know if it's the defense. The schedule, because I think a lot of times we make a lot about a schedule when we don't know how these teams are going to be year in, year out, right?
Yeah.
Supposedly the Lions and the Giants have 2 of the most difficult schedules that are out there, except we don't know if those other teams are going to be that great. So until we know, who knows? I do know this. Committing to defenses is a little tricky in fantasy because all of them give up points. Like, they all give up something. It just depends on what they're giving up. The thing you want to look at is defense and special teams. Who has the special teams that not only like hold up well, but like that's a weapon? Like what special teams unit are you going to look up and go, at the end of the year, they gave me 3 to 4 touchdowns, right? 4 touchdowns, 5 touchdowns, right? Like, what special teams unit has an ability, especially now that you just can't kick the ball out the back of the end zone because it's coming up so far that all you need is 2 first downs and you're in field goal position. Or if you're the Jaguars, all you need is to get like to the 45 and you can just boom a 70-yarder apparently, right? So, like, what special teams unit gives you that added value? The Ravens, I believe their special teams unit's going to be special. The Eagles have a chance to have a really good special teams unit. The Giants will have an improved defense, and their special teams will be better. And so I think there's just a lot of these teams that are around the same place that there's no way you should be picking the Lions as a starting defense if you were going to have a starting defense with all of these different defenses out there that can give you extra numbers. Are they good on a week in, week out if you're streaming, like you said, if you don't have Fab? And even if you do, if you had to like risk $1, I think it'd be worth it, but I'm not putting the Lions out there, especially with them having to deal with the teams that they have to deal with twice a year, every year, who know their defense better than anyone else, and that happen to put up major amounts of yards and points in fantasy.
All right. Thank you for that. Chris, what are your thoughts on the Lions defense?
Yeah, so kind of go back to what James said. If you're playing in a Fab League, just a little tip. If you're like, look 2-3 weeks out and pick up your defense for free. Don't even waste your Fab on a defense. So So I probably wouldn't draft the Lions as my starting defense either. What I would do is I would monitor them and look for the kind of the end of the season schedule and looking their weeks 14 through 18, playing at home against Dallas, which could be a rough one, but then at Los Angeles at the Rams, which again we talked about Stafford briefly. Like if Stafford's not there, like giddy up, start every defense against the Rams. Home against Pittsburgh, I'm not convinced that the Pittsburgh offense is going to be any good. And then they play at Minnesota and at Chicago, who could be two teams. JJ McCarthy, I don't know. He might be their savior. They might score a bunch of points, but I do know that Caleb Williams turns the ball over. So those are some good matchups that I would keep an eye on. I wouldn't necessarily hold on to the defense or anything for multiple weeks prior to, but just kind of keep an eye out and see how those teams are doing, and then maybe pick them up for the playoff run.
All right. Thank you for that. Great insights from each of you guys, somewhat the same, but slightly different on the defenses there. Kickers, guys, the show's getting a little bit long, so I'm just going to do kickers for us. Take Jake Bates. All right. Just take the guy. Take James's advice. Take him one round early instead of the last round. And if you can't get Jake Bates, get the Jacksonville kicker, Jake Bates' former teammate, I believe. Just grab one kicker, live with them, find a guy in an offense that tends to score a lot of points. And
I'm playing a league without kickers.
Or you do that.
Better.
That might be the better move.
Extra flex.
All right. Well, guys, this is your opportunity. Final thought, final piece of advice for anybody in fantasy football. Last nugget of advice you want to drop or give before we get out of here. James, let's start with you.
So if you do the thing where you move up your kicker and your defense around, you got that last pick to take a skill guy. I'm taking Amari Cooper. He's unsigned at this point. Everybody's kind of talking about the 49ers, but wherever he's going to sign someplace where he's going to have probably number 2 role, but he's going to have a role. So you get somebody who's at least a contributor, somebody that you feel okay putting in your lineup in like the last round of the draft for basically free.
Okay. Coach Clemens, what's your last piece of advice?
With your final three picks of your draft, take big swings. Take big, ridiculous. People are going to laugh at you. Why are you taking that guy type of swings? You know why? Because those 3 picks are usually never going to be the picks that win you and or lose you fantasy. If you didn't do your due diligence in those first rounds, in those mid rounds where you really build your team at, you're probably going to lose anyway. Take big swings like Jalen Milroe. Take him with those last 3 picks somewhere in there, because if things go wrong with Sam Darnold, and we all know that they probably will, they're going to put Jalen Milroe in there while they're tanking for the season, and he's going to run for 80+ yards every single game, and he's going to be one of the best guys in fantasy down the stretch. So take big swings. Oh, and while you're at it, go over to Fantasy Life, get that tier 2 subscription. And if you do it quickly, you can get promo code COACH, get it for 20% off tier 1 or tier 2 over at Fantasy Life. I promise you won't be disappointed.
Awesome. Thank you, Coach. And Chris, what do you got?
I'll just give you kind of a later round guy. Emeka Egbuka, love the guy. He was the highest rated wide receiver coming out of high school. I guess probably he's now moving up draft boards now, so he might not be as late as he was even a couple weeks ago. Godwin's going to be hurt. He's probably going to start in the pup. Evans is getting older, even though he'll still have 1,000 yards this season. But the dude's a stud. Baker loves him. Interview with Sports Illustrated. What's the first thing they ask him? They say, "Hey, what do you think about the season going forward?" And Baker steps in and just says, "This guy's the real deal." Didn't even answer the question. Just started talking him up and says that he's rare. So draft him. He's the one guy I feel really confident going late.
All right. Well, thank you guys, all 3 of you, for being here, sharing so much information with all the listeners out here. Again, James Cook, Sports Writer of the Year for Community Newspaper Holdings Incorporated. We got a special guest in Coach Gene Clemens from Fantasy Life, Fantasy Football, and then Chris Haynes, a friend of the podcast, and I'm going to call you Fantasy Football Commissioner Extraordinaire as well.
Thanks.
All of you guys, thank you for taking the time and sharing your insights. And I wish you all well on your fantasy football seasons.
Hey,
Thanks,
thank you.
Matt.
Again, a big thank you to James Cook, the senior sports writer for the Traverse City Record Eagle. A big thank you to Coach Gene Clemens from Fantasy Life, Fantasy Football. And a big thank you to Chris Haynes, a friend of the podcast and Fantasy Football extraordinaire. Folks, thank you so much for tuning in. Please tell your family and friends about the show. Find us on social media as well as all major streaming platforms, including YouTube. We'd love to hear your thoughts and reviews. Check out more episodes and content at notthesameoldlions.com. And until next time, stay gritty, my friends.